Welcome back to the School of Shabs. 1 year next month to the tragic murder of George Floyd. George Floyd's murder ignited discussions about race everywhere, and our places of work committed to drawing up equality action plans by looking at their data. As you know, the School of Shabs thus far has been looking at supervision. So over the last year, one of the things I've been doing is looking at how much race, racism, anti-racism is discussed through supervision. And I can say, anecdotally speaking, plus with the research I'm reading, it suggests very little, particularly in the field of adult services, and that's where I work. And whilst I suspected this, because I've worked in adults for the last 23 years, I was really disappointed at myself for maintaining this status quo. So George Floyd's murder served as a reminder that actually social work is absolutely the profession for us to be having these discussions. Yeah, it's a must in supervision, and supervision gives us the space to do that. So I've been exploring different models and tools over the last year to see how we can bring the topic of race, racism and anti-racism to the fore through supervision. And what I want to do in today's video is start that discussion with you. And today I will just share some simple suggestions, because psychology research suggests that white managers actually find it quite difficult to talk about race through supervision. So how can we have these discussions in supervision? So when we talk about supervision, Liz Beddoe is a name that comes to mind, as she's written extensively about this topic, alongside others, of course. So I'm going to read a quote to you. Aspects of power, gender, ethnicity, race, cultural and geographical location, possession of different forms of capital, economic, social, cultural and symbolic, education and managerial barriers all impact on relations in supervision. Beddoe, 2015. Also want to read another quote to you by Watkin and Mill, 2014. They say that an exploration of culture within supervision via deliberate and studious consideration is vital for supervision in its future. And I would add to that, an exploration of culture and race within supervision via deliberate and studious consideration is vital for supervision in its future. So I read some research recently which suggested 3 in 10 people feel that their race acts as a barrier to career progression. And although this wasn't specific to social work, we only need to look at our layer above. We only need to look at senior management and see the exclusive island and see the lack of representation. So let's unpick why it is so important to talk about race, racism, anti-racist practice through supervision. Firstly, most importantly, if supervision practices are left unexamined, then there is a danger that as supervisors, we are simply reproducing inequalities, silencing voices of those that we supervise, but also of those who we ultimately came into the profession to support. And I'm mindful, as I said before, that research from psychology tells us that dialogue about race, culture, and ethnicity is not an easy task for many white managers in supervision. So let's look at it through the lens of the benefit to the supervisee. What is the benefit to the supervisee of talking about race, racism, and anti-racism through supervision? So supervision can help to highlight the structural inequalities alongside any personal and relational distress to the supervisee. So in today's video, I'm going to share 3 suggestions with you of how you might start the discussions about race, racism and anti-racism through supervision. Thinking about most recent events such as the Sewell report or the tragic death of Richard Okorogeye, a young black boy found in Epping Lake, where the police said to his mother, "If you can't find your son, how do you expect the police to?" Sad events like this highlight structural and institutional racism, and simply checking in with your supervisee and acknowledging the dominant political, economical, legislative influences around us can serve as an invitation for the supervisee to express any concerns and feelings and impact on them of the ills in society. I want to remind you of my earlier videos which featured my supervision model, the 6 R's for supervision, as I am mindful that without a relationship, without having invested earlier into laying a solid foundation for supervision, your supervisee may not feel at ease or trust you with the very sensitive topic of race and racism. So it's really important to build that relationship first. Again, I want to refer you to one of my earlier videos using simple ice-breaking exercises, such as getting to know one another, will all contribute to building relational supervision. So, suggestion 2. Another way to bring these conversations into supervision is when having discussions about career progression and developmental opportunities with your supervisees. Are you asking your staff who are from Black and ethnic minorities what their career goals are, what their career aspirations are, what the barriers are for them? So in my last month's video, I shared a book with you and I made the suggestion, and I'm just going to remind you again, you could ask them to read a poem, an essay, a reflection, a story, and you read it too. And then you come together in supervision to talk about the lived experience. This gives you an opportunity to bring that topic, but also that person, into the room and talk about race, racism, and anti-racism. We have to have these discussions in supervision because it's only once we understand the barriers through the eyes of the staff that we can take these up to senior management and think collectively of how we're going to reduce structural and institutional racism together. Suggestion 3. If broaching the topic of race at a personal level is not working in the way intended for whatever reason, it can be easily approached through the lens of the profession. Social work is all about promoting social justice, anti-discriminatory and anti-oppressive practice. And let me add to that, anti-racist practice. So consider it through the lens of the people you've come in to work alongside. Consider it through the lens of justice, equality, and equity. So how might you do that? So I'm suggesting the use of stories. Stories are so important. Stories help us to connect, reflect, and grow. Stories give us history, culture, values. I was really moved by reading a recent research article from Australia. And the Australian social worker talks about recognising her white privilege. And she shares these through stories. And one story that stayed with me was about her experience of working in a refugee, where she notices that the number of Aboriginal women are quite high in this refugee. And she's in this refuge. And she sees white women coming into the refuge with smaller families. And there's the Aboriginal women with larger families. And what she starts to notice is that the white women are being rehoused first. And she notices this, the Aboriginal women notice this, and they ask what the reason behind this is. And they're told by the housing provider that actually the housing stock is for smaller families. It's 2 bedrooms. The Aboriginal women say, you know what, we're willing to share, we'll move into a smaller house. And they're told, actually that wouldn't be quite right because you'd be considered underhoused. So this is an example of institutional racism, really. How the structures around us are built, how policy is built to exclude and oppress marginalised groups of people. And that's how people become marginalised, because they're excluded. So that's another really good way of talking about oppression through supervision, racism and anti-racism through supervision, right? You could say to your staff, is anyone you're currently working with, have you noticed any policy, any law, any practice that's impacting negatively on their life choices? So as supervisors, we have to take responsibility. Our supervisory skills must include demonstrating anti-racist practice. If we are unsure about this, we need to be asking for training. We cannot approach supervision in a colour-blind way, and we need to acknowledge that a failure to bring up racial, cultural issues in supervision can be at a detriment to staff from marginalised groups, and we become agents who maintain a status quo position. So I think it's absolutely okay to show some vulnerability as a supervisor, and if you frame it through the lens of commitment to change and admit that we might get some of it wrong whilst getting some of it right, then I think you create a space for honesty, mutual exploration, doubts and imperfections to prevail. The most important aspect, I feel, is that of space. The space you create between you, within you, that must feel safe, where mistakes and doubts can be explored and discussed. So, in today's video, I have made 3 very simple, straightforward suggestions. I'm going to continue with this topic of exploring race, racism and anti-racism through supervision throughout probably most of this year. And I want to take you on a journey with me because I'm learning as well. And I'm using models, using some tools, and I really encourage you to get in touch with me if you're using tools and models and want to share them with me. So just before I end today, I want to announce the winners of the competition I ran on Twitter for an official logo for the School of Shabs. So I want to say a huge thank you to Becky Salter, who collaborated and produced the official School of Shabs logo, and a huge congratulations to Chris Norman, who again collaborated with me and produced the YouTube banner. So thank you to both of you and huge congratulations once again. So thank you for watching School of Shabs today. I'll be back next month with another video. In the meantime, take care, keep safe, and I'll see you again. Bye-bye.